The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Windsor Castle, as Sergeant William Matthews adjusted his red uniform for what he believed would be another ordinary day of duty. At 45 years old, William had served as a Queen's Guard for over 20 years, standing motionless for hours while tourists snapped photos and children tried to make him smile. His weathered face had seen countless seasons change, yet his dedication never wavered. William came from a military family where service to the crown was considered the highest honor. His father had served before him and his grandfather before that. The Matthews family had protected the royal family for 3 generations, and William wore that legacy with immense pride. His uniform was always perfectly pressed, his boots polished to mirror shine, and his bearskin hat positioned exactly as regulations demanded. On this particular Tuesday morning, William took his position at the main entrance of the castle. The familiar weight of his rifle felt comfortable in his hands as he assumed the rigid stance that had become second nature to him. His eyes remained fixed straight ahead, trained to notice everything while appearing to see nothing. This was the discipline that separated the Queen's Guard from ordinary soldiers. The castle grounds were unusually quiet in the early hours. A few staff members moved about their duties, preparing for another day of royal activities. William had been briefed that the young Prince George would be visiting with his parents later that morning. At 9 years old, Prince George was already showing signs of the composure expected from future kings, though he still possessed the natural curiosity and energy of any child his age. As William stood at his post, he reflected on the changes he had witnessed during his service. He had watched Prince William grow from a young boy into a responsible father, had seen Prince Harry's playful nature evolve into devoted service, and now he was witnessing the next generation begin to understand their role in the monarchy. Each generation brought something unique to the royal family, yet the traditions and responsibilities remained constant. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from the castle gardens. William's breathing was steady and controlled, a meditation of sorts that helped him maintain his position for hours without fatigue. His mind wandered briefly to his own family, his wife Sarah, who worried about him standing in all weather conditions, and his teenage daughter Emma, who was proud to tell her friends that her father protected the royal family. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oak trees that surrounded the castle grounds. William had stood beneath these same trees in scorching summer heat and bitter winter cold. He had remained at his post during thunderstorms and snow, never once abandoning his duty. This dedication was not just about following orders, it was about honoring a tradition that connected him to centuries of guardsmen who had stood in the same place, protecting the same institution. As the morning progressed, William noticed the familiar sounds of the castle coming to life. Kitchen staff preparing breakfast, gardeners tending to the magnificent flower beds, and security personnel conducting their routine checks. Each person played their part in maintaining the smooth operation of this historic residence. William understood that his role, while seemingly simple, was crucial to the security and dignity of the royal household. The young sergeant had never imagined that this ordinary Tuesday would become a day that would change his life forever. He had no way of knowing that a simple encounter with a 9-year-old prince would challenge everything he believed about duty, honor, and service. As he stood there in the morning sunlight, William Matthews was simply doing what he had always done, serving his country and protecting the royal family with unwavering dedication and quiet pride. Prince George arrived at Windsor Castle with his characteristic blend of royal composure and childlike wonder. Dressed in a smart navy blazer and perfectly pressed trousers, he walked between his parents with the confidence that came naturally to someone born into such responsibility. Yet his bright eyes darted around the familiar grounds with genuine curiosity, as if seeing everything for the first time. The 9-year-old prince had always been fascinated by the guards who protected his family. Unlike many children who saw them as living statues or tourist attractions, George understood from an early age that these were real people with real jobs. His parents had taught him to respect the men and women who dedicated their lives to royal service, explaining that their commitment deserved recognition and gratitude. As the royal family made their way toward the main entrance, George's attention was immediately drawn to Sergeant Matthews standing at his post. There was something different about this guard that caught the young prince's eye. Perhaps it was the way William held himself with such dignity, or maybe it was the slight tremor in his hands that only someone as observant as George would notice. George had developed an unusual ability to read people, a skill that would serve him well in his future role as king. He could sense when someone was troubled, even when they tried to hide it behind a professional facade. As he observed Sergeant Matthews, George noticed subtle signs that others might miss. The tightness around the guard's eyes, the almost imperceptible sway in his stance, and the way his breathing seemed slightly labored. The young prince slowed his pace, allowing his parents to walk ahead while he lingered near William's position. This was not unusual behavior for George, who often showed interest in the people who worked at the various royal residences. His parents had learned to give him space for these moments of connection, understanding that such interactions were important for his development as a future monarch. From his peripheral vision, William was aware of the young prince's presence. Years of training had taught him to remain focused on his duties regardless of distractions, but something about Prince George's quiet observation felt different. The boy was not trying to make him laugh or break his concentration like other children often did. Instead, George seemed to be studying him with genuine concern. The morning sun had grown stronger, and William felt perspiration beginning to form under his heavy uniform. The bearskin hat, while iconic, was particularly challenging to wear for extended periods, especially when combined with the thick wool of his ceremonial jacket. He had endured much worse conditions throughout his career, but today something felt different. His body seemed to be struggling more than usual with the physical demands of his position. Prince George noticed the subtle signs of distress that William was trying so hard to conceal. The guard's face had grown slightly pale, and there was a barely noticeable tremor in his rigid posture. Most people would have walked past without a second thought, but George had been raised to pay attention to the welfare of others, especially those who served his family. The young prince found himself in an unusual situation. Royal protocol dictated that he should not interfere with the guard's duties, yet his natural compassion urged him to help someone who appeared to be in distress. George stood quietly for several minutes, weighing his options and considering the best course of action. His young mind was already beginning to understand the complex balance between following rules and doing what felt morally right. As he watched Sergeant Matthews continue his stoic vigil, Prince George made a decision that would demonstrate wisdom far beyond his 9 years. He understood that sometimes the most profound acts of leadership come not from following protocol, but from recognizing when human compassion should take precedence over formal procedures. The young prince was about to prove that true nobility lies not in titles or positions, but in the courage to act with kindness when it matters most. Without drawing attention to himself, Prince George quietly approached Sergeant Matthews. The young prince moved with the natural grace that came from years of royal training, but his motivation was purely human compassion. As he drew closer, George could see that William was indeed struggling, though the experienced guard continued to maintain his professional composure with remarkable determination. George paused just within speaking distance and said softly, "Excuse me, sir. I'm Prince George." His voice was gentle and respectful, carrying none of the commanding tone one might expect from royalty. Instead, he spoke like any concerned young person addressing someone they wanted to help. William's training prevented him from responding or even acknowledging the prince's presence, but George understood this and continued speaking. "I can see that you're not feeling well," George said with remarkable maturity for his age. "I know you're supposed to stand guard, but I think you might need to sit down for a moment." The prince's words were carefully chosen, showing both respect for the guard's duty and genuine concern for his well-being. This was not a child playing at being important, but a future king learning to balance authority with compassion. William felt his resolve wavering as the young prince's words reached him. Throughout his 20-year career, no member of the royal family had ever addressed him so directly or with such personal concern. The unexpected kindness in Prince George's voice stirred something deep within the seasoned guard, challenging his rigid adherence to protocol with the simple power of human connection. Prince George then did something that would be remembered for years to come. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small water bottle that he had been carrying. "I have some water here," he said quietly. "I think you should drink some. Nobody will mind if you break protocol for a few minutes. Your health is more important than standing perfectly still. The simplicity and sincerity of the prince's offer struck William like a physical blow. Here was a 9-year-old child, third in line to the throne of England, offering him water and permission to break military protocol out of pure human kindness. The gesture was so unexpected and so profoundly moving that William felt his carefully maintained emotional barriers begin to crumble. "Please," Prince George continued, his young voice filled with genuine worry, "I can tell you're not feeling well, and I don't want you to get sick because you're trying to protect my family. That wouldn't be right." The prince's words revealed an understanding of duty and responsibility that was remarkable for someone his age, but more importantly, they showed a compassion that transcended royal protocol and military regulation. William's hands began to shake more noticeably as the weight of Prince George's kindness settled over him. For 2 decades, he had stood at attention while being treated as little more than a tourist attraction or a piece of living furniture. Children had tried to make him laugh, adults had posed for photos beside him, and countless visitors had treated him as if he were not even human. But this young prince saw him as a person deserving of care and concern. The emotional impact of this recognition was overwhelming. William had never expected such direct acknowledgement of his humanity from any member of the royal family, let alone from a child who was showing more maturity and leadership than many adults. The guard felt tears beginning to form in his eyes, though years of training helped him maintain his outward composure, even as his inner world was being transformed. Prince George waited patiently, holding the water bottle and watching the guard with the kind of steady, compassionate gaze that suggested he truly understood the significance of this moment. The young prince seemed to sense that he was witnessing something important in William's life, and he remained quietly supportive, giving the guard time to process this unexpected encounter with genuine royal kindness and human dignity. The moment stretched between them like a bridge connecting 2 different worlds, one of rigid military tradition and another of compassionate humanity. William found himself at a crossroads he had never imagined facing. His entire identity was built around following orders and maintaining discipline, yet here was a member of the royal family asking him to put his own well-being first. Prince George seemed to understand the internal struggle taking place within the guard. With wisdom that belied his young age, the prince stepped closer and said quietly, "My great-grandmother always told me that the people who serve our family are the most important people in the kingdom. She said we should never forget that they have families and feelings too. I think she would want you to take care of yourself." These words, spoken with such genuine sincerity, finally broke through William's defenses. The reference to the late Queen Elizabeth, who had been universally beloved by her guards, struck him particularly deeply. Queen Elizabeth had indeed been known for her personal kindness to staff members, though such interactions were usually private and formal. To hear her compassion referenced by her great-grandson in such a personal context was overwhelming. William felt his rigid posture beginning to soften, despite his best efforts to maintain military bearing. The physical symptoms he had been fighting, dizziness, fatigue, and what he now realized was the beginning of heat exhaustion, were becoming impossible to ignore. Prince George's permission to break protocol felt like a lifeline being thrown to a drowning man. "You don't have to say anything," Prince George continued, showing remarkable emotional intelligence. "I know you're not supposed to talk while you're on duty, but you can take the water. I'll stay here with you to make sure you're okay." The young prince's offer to remain by the guard's side demonstrated not just kindness, but a sense of responsibility that was already showing signs of the leadership qualities he would need as a future king. For the first time in his 20-year career, William slowly raised his hand and accepted something from a member of the royal family. As his fingers closed around the water bottle that Prince George offered, he felt as though he was crossing an invisible line that separated his professional duty from his basic humanity. The simple act of taking a drink of water became a profound moment of human connection. As William drank, he felt immediate physical relief, but the emotional impact was even more significant. Prince George stood beside him, not as a superior looking down on a subordinate, but as one human being caring for another. The young prince's presence was comforting rather than commanding, supportive rather than demanding. "My father says that the guards who protect us are heroes," Prince George said softly. "He says you all sacrifice a lot to keep us safe and that we should never take that for granted." I want you to know that I see you as a real person, not just someone in a uniform." These words, coming from a 9-year-old who would one day be king, carried a weight and sincerity that moved William to his core. The guard realized that this young prince was already demonstrating the kind of leadership that inspired loyalty, not through fear or authority, but through genuine care and respect for others. William had served under many officers and had met numerous members of the royal family, but he had never encountered such natural compassion and wisdom in someone so young. As the immediate physical crisis passed, William began to understand that something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of his role and his relationship with the royal family he served. Prince George had shown him that true nobility lay not in maintaining distance and formality, but in recognizing the humanity in everyone around you. This realization would change everything for the devoted guard. As William stood there, still holding the water bottle that Prince George had given him, he felt emotions that he had kept buried for decades beginning to surface. The young prince remained quietly beside him, creating a safe space where the guard could process this unexpected moment of human connection. For the first time in his military career, William felt truly seen and valued as an individual, rather than just a uniformed figure. Prince George noticed that the guard's color was returning to normal, and that his breathing had become more steady. Satisfied that the immediate health concern had been addressed, the young prince began to engage William in a different way. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "I'd like to know who you are." This simple question carried profound significance, acknowledging William's identity beyond his role as a guard. Although military protocol prevented William from responding verbally while on duty, Prince George seemed to understand this limitation. The prince continued speaking, not expecting answers but simply sharing his thoughts. "I think it must be difficult to stand so still for so long," he said. "And I imagine it gets lonely sometimes with people looking at you but not really seeing you." These words struck William with surprising accuracy. The young prince had identified something that William himself had never fully articulated: the loneliness that came with being treated as an object rather than a person. Tourists photographed him, children tried to make him laugh, and visitors discussed him as if he couldn't hear, but very few people ever acknowledged his humanity. Prince George then did something even more remarkable. He positioned himself beside William and attempted to stand at attention in a childish imitation of the guard's posture. "Is this how you have to stand?" he asked with genuine curiosity. "It looks really hard." The sight of the young prince, trying to mirror his rigid stance, brought a warmth to William's heart that he hadn't felt in years. The guard watched from the corner of his eye as Prince George struggled to maintain the formal position for even a few minutes. The boy's natural energy made stillness difficult, and his face soon showed the strain of trying to remain motionless. "Wow," Prince George said after a few moments, relaxing his posture. "I can't imagine doing this for hours. You must be really strong." This innocent observation made William realize how much physical and mental strength his job actually required. He had become so accustomed to the demands of his position that he had stopped thinking of himself as someone doing something difficult or noteworthy. Prince George's fresh perspective helped him see his own dedication and endurance in a new light. "I think what you do is really important," Prince George continued, his voice filled with genuine admiration, "not just because you protect us, but because you show people what honor and commitment look like. When I see you standing here so proudly, it makes me want to be better too." The young prince's words revealed an understanding of leadership and inspiration that was remarkable for his age. William felt tears welling up in his eyes as he listened to Prince George's sincere appreciation. No commanding officer had ever spoken to him with such respect and recognition. No member of the royal family had ever acknowledged the personal sacrifice and dedication that his service required. To hear such words from a 9-year-old prince who would one day be his king was almost overwhelming. The emotional impact of this encounter was beginning to transform William's understanding of his role and his relationship with the royal family. He realized that he had been serving not just an institution, but real people who appreciated his sacrifice and saw him as an individual worthy of respect and care. This realization would soon lead him to make a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. Prince George seemed to sense the profound effect his words were having on the guard. With the intuitive wisdom that some children possess, he continued to offer quiet companionship, allowing William time to process this life-changing moment of recognition and human connection. As their extraordinary encounter continued, Prince George began sharing some of his own thoughts about duty and service. "Sometimes I worry about becoming king one day," he confided to William with the honesty that only children possess. "It seems like such a big responsibility, and I want to make sure I do it right. I think watching people like you helps me understand what real service looks like." These words revealed the depth of thought that Prince George was already giving to his future role. At 9 years old, he was grappling with concepts that many adults never fully understand. His ability to see William as a teacher and role model, rather than simply as hired protection, demonstrated a maturity and humility that moved the guard profoundly. William found himself wishing he could respond, could tell this remarkable young prince that his compassion and thoughtfulness already showed the qualities of a great leader. The irony was not lost on him that he was learning as much from this child as the prince claimed to be learning from him. Prince George was teaching him about the power of simple human kindness and the importance of seeing others as individuals. "My parents always tell me that the most important thing about being royal is remembering that everyone matters," Prince George continued. "They say that titles and crowns don't make you better than other people. They just give you more responsibility to help and serve others." The young prince's words reflected the values that his parents had instilled in him, values that were clearly taking root in his developing character. As William listened to Prince George speak about service and responsibility, he began to reflect on his own motivations for his military career. He had joined the Queen's Guard out of family tradition and patriotic duty, but over the years the joy and meaning had been slowly eroded by the routine and the feeling of being invisible. This young prince was reminding him why his service mattered and helping him see his role with fresh eyes. Prince George then made an observation that would stay with William for the rest of his life. "I think the bravest people are the ones who choose to serve others even when it's hard, and even when no one notices," he said thoughtfully. "That's what you do every day. You're brave not because you carry a weapon, but because you choose to stand here and protect people, even when it means you can't talk or move or sometimes even feel comfortable." This insight into the nature of courage and service came from a 9-year-old child, yet it contained wisdom that many adults never grasp. Prince George was recognizing that true bravery often lies in quiet, consistent acts of dedication rather than dramatic gestures. His words helped William understand that his daily commitment was indeed a form of heroism, even if it went largely unnoticed. The guard felt a profound shift occurring within him as he absorbed Prince George's words. For 20 years he had measured his success by his ability to remain invisible and unnoticed. But this young prince was showing him that being seen and valued as a person didn't diminish his professionalism. It enhanced it. Recognition of his humanity made his service more meaningful, not less. William realized that his encounter with Prince George had given him something he hadn't even known he was missing, a sense of personal connection to the family he served and an understanding that his individual worth was recognized and appreciated. This young prince had shown him that the royal family saw their guards not as objects or tools, but as valued human beings whose sacrifice was both noticed and cherished. As this realization settled over him, William began to understand that this moment would mark a turning point in his life. Prince George's gentle act of compassion had not only addressed his immediate physical needs but had also touched something deep in his soul, forcing him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about duty, service, and his own value as a human being. In the days that followed his encounter with Prince George, William found himself unable to concentrate on his duties in the same way he had for 20 years. The young prince's words echoed in his mind, and the memory of that simple act of human kindness had awakened something within him that he couldn't ignore. He began to see his role differently, not as a burden or routine, but as a meaningful connection to people who truly valued his service. However, this new awareness also brought with it a painful realization. William understood that his decades of service had cost him more than he had been willing to admit. He had missed countless family dinners, school events with his daughter, and quiet evenings with his wife. He had sacrificed his own health and happiness in service to duty, believing that this was the highest form of honor. But Prince George had shown him that true service should not require the complete erasure of one's humanity. The guard spent sleepless nights thinking about Prince George's words about bravery and choice. The young prince had said that the bravest people choose to serve others even when it's difficult, but William began to wonder if there was also bravery in choosing to serve in a different way. Perhaps true courage lay not just in enduring hardship, but in recognizing when it was time to make a change that honored both duty and personal well-being. After much reflection and several emotional conversations with his wife Sarah, William made a decision that surprised everyone who knew him. He submitted his resignation from the Queen's Guard, effective at the end of the month. His fellow guards were shocked, his commanding officers were puzzled, and his family was initially worried about his sudden change of heart. But William knew with absolute certainty that this was the right choice. In his resignation letter, William explained that his encounter with Prince George had opened his eyes to new possibilities for service. He wrote that the young prince had taught him that honoring duty didn't always mean sacrificing everything else, and that sometimes the most meaningful service comes from choosing to live a life that balances commitment with personal fulfillment. He requested permission to meet with Prince George one final time before leaving his post. When the meeting was arranged, William found himself face to face with the young prince who had changed his life. Prince George listened intently as William explained his decision, and the guard was moved to see genuine concern in the boy's eyes. "I hope I didn't say anything that made you sad," Prince George said with the earnest worry of a child who feared he might have caused harm. William smiled and assured the prince that his words had brought joy, not sadness. He explained that Prince George had helped him remember why service mattered and had given him the courage to find new ways to honor that calling. "You taught me that being brave sometimes means making difficult choices," William said. "And you showed me that true leadership comes from caring about people as individuals, not just as positions or roles." Prince George seemed to understand, nodding with the wisdom that had impressed William from their first meeting. "Will you still serve the kingdom?" the young prince asked. William nodded and explained that he planned to become a counselor for military veterans, helping other soldiers transition to civilian life while honoring their service and addressing their needs as whole human beings. As they said goodbye, Prince George did something that would remain with William forever. The young prince reached out and shook his hand, not as a royal greeting a subject, but as one human being acknowledging another with respect and friendship. "Thank you for protecting my family," Prince George said simply, "and thank you for teaching me about real courage." William left Windsor Castle that day with tears in his eyes, but they were tears of gratitude rather than grief. A 9-year-old prince had shown him that the highest form of service comes from recognizing the humanity in others and in oneself. Prince George's gentle act of offering water to a struggling guard had rippled outward, transforming a life and creating a legacy of compassion that would touch many others in the years to come. The young prince had demonstrated that true nobility lies not in commanding others, but in the simple, profound act of caring for those around you.